I want to start by asking you a sort of big question that I like to ask sometimes. What matters to you?
If I just answer off the top of my head, everything. Everything matters.
I like that.
Comes to me. Now, I don't know if that's a positive or negative quality. But, well, I guess what matters to me really is peace, individual peace and peace in the world. And that's what matters to me. I'd like to see a peaceful world.
So in terms of your individual peace, like these days in your life, are there certain things that you're connecting to that are helping you be more peaceful, that are present in your life?
Oh yeah. They're not any different really from what I've been doing for the last 40 years, which is practicing the integral yoga teachings, really, the philosophy and also the physical practices, I should say, like pranayama and hatha. Of course, I don't do as much hatha as I did many years ago. In March, I was 80 years old, so the body is not as supple as it was before, but deep relaxation, especially yoga nidra. So now I have, at least at this point, a bit more time than I had before because I haven't been working full time lately. So I do a lot of deep relaxation, and I use Gurudev's tape, CD, and I do that every day. I love it. And it's just so blissful, and it really helps to feel peaceful. And, basically that's it. Pranayama is so helpful, and of course, meditation. I just love yoga nidra, deep relaxation, because you're relaxing the body as well as the mind and the spirit. So, yeah, I guess, and constant self-analysis too. I love jnana yoga, constant self-analysis. If I feel myself.
The constant self-analysis. So would you say, you have a deep interest in kind of figuring out how you work, like what your own tendencies are? So like during the day, being aware of your thoughts. So I'm having that thought again. And then as you get to know yourself more and become more aware, do you find that there's a next step into implementing some change that's going to be beneficial for you?
Yes, of course. I think that's a lifelong, if not a lives long process. I can't see how, if you're interested in growing spiritually or psychologically too, and even intellectually, how you wouldn't take a look at your thoughts and your actions and see how you can improve yourself if you find some negative habit, which we all have. And also, I think probably just as important is considering other people's thoughts about your behavior as well, or reactions, especially reactions to behavior. And it's a difficult process because sometimes the mind will say, well, it's that person's perspective, or that person has an issue with me, so forth, so on. But I think, no, even if that might be true, it's really it's so valuable to consider that person's reaction and how you reacted to it. I think that's very important. You can learn so much about yourself I used to be more interested in learning about others and analyzing others' behavior towards me or towards anyone else. And that's sometimes fun to do and really takes you away from working on yourself. But it seems like it used to be very easy to do that for me. Oh, I'm very interested in people. But I also think it's more important now. It feels more important to look at myself, and and I don't want to be self-involved in the sense that you become obsessive, but to really consider my actions and my reactions, and it's not an easy process. It's not an easy process to be honest with yourself, especially.
Is it more practical as well, though, to be focused on yourself, because that's what I have direct control of? So just on a very practical level, like I can't control anyone else. So to be so invested in what other people are doing and what they're like, at least for myself, I could say that that's caused great frustration. So even though I might frustrate myself and there's certain habits and ways of being that I have that maybe I'd prefer to be different, at least there's something there that I can work on because I have direct control over it.
Of course. But somehow, if you have a good imagination, I'm a writer also, so I know you are. It's a lot of fun to look at other people and try to figure out their motivations and so forth. And sometimes actually that's practical too, because sometimes you would like to know something about other people, and it helps you become sensitive to them too. In that sense, it could be positive. But yeah, of course, it's more fruitful to be looking at yourself and seeing how you can transform. And it's not easy self-transformation. I mean, I think frankly, it takes lifetimes. At least maybe I'm speaking for myself. I've seen some transformations in myself, but I really want to be honest. I want to be honest. You were asking the question before, what matters to me? Truthfulness matters to me too. And I think that's Satyam, it's called in Sanskrit. It's not easy to be honest, especially with yourself. Sometimes you feel self-protective. It's the ego, it's the ego. But I think that goes along with being, with the process of self-analysis and also with feeling peaceful. How could you really feel peaceful if you're not honest? Because there's always a part of you that knows something's imbalanced there. What is it? But it's a process of self-discovery.
I feel the truthfulness is really, really important, especially maybe in relationship with other people. And I'm curious if you received messages, if you can remember being a child, to portray yourself in a certain way that, like, when you go out in public, we don't say maybe the same things that we do at home, right? Or this desire to impress other people or have them, kind of control how they view me in a way, as opposed to an attitude of I'm just going to be me, and I get to be me anywhere that I am. If I'm in public or I'm at home, that doesn't mean I'm going to do the same thing, but I don't need to. Basically, I think like the word I'm kind of moving around is phony. Like what is inauthentic, is that something that you've worked on yourself? And I'm curious, just in terms of your childhood, like, did you ever receive messages that it wasn't okay to be authentic? And then now maybe you've returned back to that place of no, I can be authentic, and it's really important for me to be so.
That's a great question. I never thought about it actually like that, but I did think about it in relation to being a woman and the expected behavior of women. And especially when I was growing up, I think it's freer now. And, I think women can really express their personalities and their being in a more full way, and it's acceptable. When I was growing up, you had to be a quote unquote lady, and sit a certain way, your legs crossed, or not. There were just certain expectations of what it was to be a girl. You couldn't be wild if you felt like being wild, especially in company. Had to be more discreet. And yeah, it's true. That felt rigid to me because that you could feel the restraints. You could feel the restraints, even though maybe intellectually you couldn't figure it all out. But I used to wish I was a boy, I remember, because I saw that they had more leeway. They didn't have those same, there were other expectations, but at the time, those expectations didn't seem to be there. If a girl was acting up, at least what was considered acting up, or running around and not sitting quietly and primly in company, and then that behavior was a negative behavior and you'd be spoken to. And whereas the boys can do that, and everybody laughed and would say, oh, he's mischievous or something like that. So I do remember that. So I grew up with those kinds of expectations and actually some resentment too. It really, somehow, you feel that, sometimes it doesn't manifest directly, and you have to deal with those feelings and figure them out. So, yeah, I think in a certain way we are always, we're always acting a little bit, and sometimes that's not such a bad thing, because sometimes you don't feel like being discreet, but discretion is called for. And that's what I like about our grandpa guru, Swami Shivananda's teaching of adapt, adjust, and accommodate, because sometimes you do have to accommodate to certain situations. So that's, I think, a positive aspect of that situation. But but being phony, that rubs me the wrong way when I think I'm being phony. And sometimes that you do see it in others, and but maybe that's a judgment too. What's behind that behavior? I would like to ask.
Right. It seems that it's possible to adjust and accommodate without losing authenticity at the same time, though. I'm trying to think of time where I felt I wasn't able to adjust or accommodate, and I couldn't still be myself. I couldn't be authentic, So maybe both of them can be held at the same time. But I think what I sense you're bringing up a little bit too is this idea of living in community and how to do it, which I think is really tricky business sometimes. The way that I consider it is that it's kind of like a mixed bag, that there's some wonderful benefits that you receive from living in community with other people, to be a part of something and just lots of tangible benefits. And then there's also things that you need to give up. You can't always get your own way because you're, colliding with other people and how they want it to be. So, is it, how do you personally navigate living in community and kind of trying to do that in as graceful way as possible?
Living in community is a real challenge. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful opportunity. Of course, we all always live in community. We're living in the world. Right. But I know what you mean, especially in what we call in the yogic tradition, or even in the Buddhist or Jain tradition, what's called Sangha here, living in the spiritual community. It's exponentially different from living in a family or just being in a relationship. It's not that different, but it's just more amplified. So you have, excuse me, many more opportunities to interact and to have these challenges and to have to deal with them. So living in community, Gurudev used to talk about Yogaville. So here we can speak specifically about Yogaville. I've been living here since 1986, and you've been here for several years. Just the way you referred to in the beginning, there are expectations for certain behavior in the family, in a relationship. There are more expectations in a way, or more people have expectations in a community. So it is really it is challenging. And I would say, to be authentic, from my experience, I also was brought up in my family to appease, to be the appeaser, always to want to be peaceful and not have a lot of conflict. And that's impossible. You have to learn how to navigate that and not take it personally. So part of it is being detached in a way from your own selfish ego. I think in a community, from my experience, and this is what I felt that I've been doing, is I need to be true to myself. I want to be authentic. And if I am in a situation that doesn't feel right to me, I will express it and express why. And it's hard to do that without being emotional, and that's where the practices come in, learning to be more detached and being the witness, and I don't want to sound self-righteous. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do this. But these are the teachings we have. So I think, to be honest and take a chance that you might get some negative feedback, or you might get lots of negative feedback. I remember years ago, I was in a situation where I saw that somebody, and I just had this information that someone had done something that was against the rules. It was somebody who was volunteering here years ago, and it was very much against the rules. It had to do with alcohol. And they were new people, actually. They were lights or karma yogis. We didn't have the light program yet. And this person exposed these people to some really dangerous situations. And I had heard about it. Someone told me about this in firsthand. And I thought, that's really dangerous. It's not just that it breaks the rules, but it's destructive to people. It's destructive to people physically, and it could have been destructive physically and also psychologically. And I thought, do I tell the administration? Well, then I sound like I'm a snitch or something, and you don't want to be a snitch. And the person who was the perpetrator, let's say, was a friend of mine. Was a friend, and we were close. And I spoke to him, and he was very angry at me. And I thought, he's going to keep on doing this. I know, because I found out he had a real problem. And it was an addiction. So I thought about it. Am I going to be a snitch? Nobody's going to like me because everyone likes him, blah, blah, blah. And I finally decided the right thing to do was to speak to the administration about it, since he wouldn't. And sure enough, I did it, and he was spoken to. He wasn't kicked out or anything, but he was spoken to. He was so angry at me. Almost the whole community was angry at me. Some people stopped speaking with me. And this person said to me, I loved you and I thought you loved me. And I thought about it, and it was very difficult. And he didn't speak to me for about 6 months. And I got a lot of negative feedback. And in the long run, he ended up doing something that was very dangerous. He had an accident with somebody's car because of this addiction. And I thought to myself, it was a very difficult period. It was very hard to go through. People thought I was betraying. In my heart, I knew it was the right thing. And I was glad that I did it. But it's very difficult to be yourself in that way. Yeah, and sometimes you're on the other end of it. You know, you may want to, it always almost seems that you have the opportunity to take a chance and to stand up for yourself, at least to stand up for what you think is right. And you may not even be right in the moment. You may or you may not be, but you have to be courageous enough to stand up for yourself, and you can do it in a kind and compassionate way. Of course, you would want to, and you have to expect that not everybody is going to agree with you, or maybe nobody will agree with you, and you have to accept that. Sometimes you have to accept that you need to accept the decision of others and let it go, and that's where the detachment comes in, and the ego doesn't like that. But those kinds of situations where you do have to give in sometimes for the larger good of the community, even if you don't agree, is also a great lesson and an opportunity to use your will to stand up to your own ego. Mixed bag.
It seems like it's such art to me, like knowing when to maybe be courageous and step forward towards change, I guess, or something different, and when to just accept, okay, this is how it is, and part of my practice is to accept. And so that's why I like to call life art, because in every situation, it's a bit different, and what might be right in one situation is not right in another situation, right?
Well, Shakespeare said it. The whole world is a stage, right? And we are the players. And Gurudev said it all the time. It's really in the yogic philosophy, you know, that the world is a stage. It's a play, and we each have our role. And you have to go with your heart, you know. I think you use your head, and then you use your heart as well. And if your head can't figure it out, just meditate and listen to your heart, and your heart will tell you what to do, even if it's not what's comfortable, because, you know, in order to grow spiritually, to use a cliche, you've got to get out of your comfort zone. No pain, no gain, right? That's another one of our adages, you know, old saying, no pain, no gain. So you have to take a chance, and you'll always learn. It's difficult in a community. Gurudev talked about Yogaville as you know, his vision of a model community to express a heaven on earth. That we could have heaven on earth. We could bring heaven to earth. Well, what does that mean? It probably means something different to everyone. You know, to me, you know, you think it means, oh, well, everything is so peaceful and there's so much harmony. Yes, we're striving for harmony and we're striving for peace, but it's a process. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be peaceful. and everyone's going to be peaceful all the time or harmonious. That's not, I don't think that's possible on this loka, on this level, in the world. I don't even think the world is meant for that. But what it is meant for is to give us the opportunity to become peaceful in ourselves. And then we exude that peace and harmony in all these situations. We play our role. And sometimes we fail at it. Sometimes we're not so great. Some actors don't have such a great night when they're on stage. But it just gives you an opportunity to learn, and, we're human, right?
Yeah. I think like this compassion feels really important to me for the experience that all of us are going through. This life thing, it's tricky business sometimes. One of the things I wanted to ask you about that feels sometimes the most tricky is judgments, of other people, especially. And so, judging someone else feels like such a trap and such an easy thing to do. And maybe that's because, it's natural in a way to discern, what's going on, what do I like and what do I not like, about life. But, this distinction between, judgment and discernment, that can make all the difference, because it feels unrealistic, at least for myself, to like eliminate judgment, completely. Like, right. I don't think that's going to happen, at least for me in my mind. Like, my mind doesn't. But if I shift a little bit towards discernment and keep the compassion there while I'm discerning, that feels like it makes a big difference.
I know sometimes very often, especially when you're in a spiritual community in that kind of environment, you'll hear people saying, speaking about judgment as though it's something negative. Well, how can you? And we have judges. We have a whole system of judgment. How could you not have judgment? How could you not judge? It is related to discrimination and discernment, but and judgment has a place. There is a right way, a right action, and a wrong action, and you find out yourself if you did a right action or you performed a wrong action. It comes back to you. It does come back to you. But judging others in the sense that there's no purpose to it except maybe for gossip or to assuage your own ego for some reason, that's a different story. And I think we really know the difference. But we have a tendency to judge others when we don't want to look at ourselves. It's easier, much easier. But you know how they always say that a lot of times when you're judging others for certain qualities that they have or actions that they take or whatever, it's because we see ourselves. Other people are like mirrors for us. I think that's what it is in a sangha or any community where you're with people all the time, in a work situation, in a school. It could be anywhere, really. Of course, in a spiritual community, it's so much more intense because you're with the same people all the time, and you're working with them, you're eating with them, you're living with them all the time, you're socializing with them. So we have many more opportunities to be judgmental, sense judging, or to be compassionate. They go hand in hand sometimes, I think, especially the judging part of it, because then you'll have an opportunity, if you really have the dedication to your own spiritual growth, if you have that commitment, you'll catch yourself at some point and say, why did I say that? Or why did I think that? Why did I think that person? What is it that makes me react to that person's habit or posture or whatever it may be? It's an ongoing process. It's like self-educational, but it takes a lot of commitment. When we had the dance camp here, we used to have the Bartonatium dance camp for 25 years. I used to teach Hatha there, and we learned so much from Gurudev, and because he came up with this kind of little motto, and that he shared with the dance camp students, but then he used to use it all the time for everyone in satsang and in talks. He used to call it the 3Ds, that these students in the dance camp were developing the 3Ds, and they were discipline, devotion, and dedication. I don't remember the exact order, but discipline, dedication, devotion, something. You needed all those three to accomplish anything in life, really. So accomplishing self-transformation, you need those qualities big time. You have to remember, you have to be dedicated to the process, and it helps to develop your willpower. And then, the judgment, becomes compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the flip side to not being dedicated to self-transformation or growth? It's just, this is the way that I am, and I'm just going to kind of repeat the same cycles that I'm going through. And like, what is a life like for someone who is not genuinely interested in self-improvement?
Well, I don't know about you, but I could remember many years ago when I was really young, and I was brought up with parents who didn't have a lot materially, had a bit of harsh backgrounds. My mom was an immigrant from Poland, and she had a lot of challenges in her life, and so they were very focused on the material life, on basically survival. Then when they had, they were not very secure. They were insecure, so they wanted some more. So we were focused a lot on, when I heard a lot about material survival and, insecurities around that. And I remember when I was young, I was just really interested in mostly clothing and thinking about the future. And, that wasn't the only thing really, because there was always this thirst to learn more, and to be happy, and to be peaceful. But I remember I thought, the greatest thing in the world was to go to the theater, or to be able to buy a beautiful dress or pair of shoes that were so gorgeous and chic and look beautiful and dress up. And I didn't think very much about spiritual life, for quite a while. But then when you start to realize that those things don't bring you what you're looking for ultimately, I think it's maturity, hopefully. And some people maybe don't mature to that level. I don't know, of thinking that I know that's true. We see it in the world. I think it's very painful. It must cause a lot of suffering. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some people are just, their karma takes them into this lifetime where they're not very interested in spiritual growth, and they feel content. It's possible. I don't know. I have to honestly say, I don't know, but I know for me, the more it's not like I achieved that much. I was interested in intellectual achievement, and I went for it, and I had the dedication and the devotion and the discipline, and I went for it, and I worked very hard for that, and I got a doctorate. That's what I wanted. And then with all that, through all that process, seeing how I behaved sometimes selfishly, because only thinking of that, I was totally focused on it. and to the detriment sometimes of my children. And I accomplished it. And I realized, big deal. Really, I had made mistakes. I looked back and I suffered for it. It was painful psychologically. It was painful that I thought, wow, I did get what I wanted. I didn't care about the material life that much at that point. I went from wanting material things to wanting the intellectual, and I achieved it. And I realized that was not the most important thing in life. So that was good. Like Gurudev said, a mistake is a mistake. It wasn't a mistake that I had the discipline or that I got the doctorate. I was able to use it in good ways, to serve too. But it didn't make me permanently happy, let's put it that way, or peaceful at all. So I realized that, it made me go deeper and deeper into searching for what would make one peaceful, or at least make me peaceful more and happy and content. And
while you were going for it, did you think that it would make you like happier than you've ever been before once you achieved that you would be then content? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have. I was passionate. Yeah. I was passionate for it. Yeah. And then when I got involved in,
like
I was going to say,
you would achieve it, and then that would be it. That would be like you would attain it. You'd reach the mountaintop. Yeah.
And then, whoop, it wasn't that. But luckily, I did find my spiritual path. And actually, I have to say that for years, I got to the point, even in my 20s, I got to the point that I was at the same time looking for something spiritual. So I think it wasn't so cut and dry, but there was like an inner conflict between the intellectual and the spiritual, I could say. And then I realized at some point, well, spirituality is everything. It's an integration of everything. It's not like you have to reject the material or the intellectual. You just realize that each has its place, and that acquisition is not going to make you happy permanently, that it really is unconditional love. That, at least that's my experience now. Expressing unconditional love feels that would be the ultimate to me. Knowing
unconditional love.
Yes.
Is that something that you're finding that you can practice?
Yeah, I can. I can't say I can always achieve it. I can't honestly say that. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it. And sometimes, I don't know. I don't even feel now that I actually need to know. That's the other thing. I don't need to know. I just need to do what my heart tells me is the right thing to do. And I feel also now nowhere to go. Maybe it's my age, or maybe it's just being in this community and being with my spiritual guide. I feel like I don't need anything else but these teachings. I dreamt about Gurudev this morning, being with him here at the ashram and being with him in his room. And there was no spiritual conversation. There was just being. And just
what's more spiritual than that?
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm getting to. And thanks for leading me there, is the idea of the doing is necessary in this world, but it's not the end all and be all of our human experience. It's the being. You know, it sounds like a cliche. It is a cliche, probably, to say, you know, we're not human doings, we're human beings, but we do call ourselves human beings. And being, you know, being there. Remember that movie?
Yeah, it's almost like I don't even know how we have gotten far from that, or you know, if we move away from the beingness, like what is that about? Because it's so
Maya.
it's so obvious to that being is what we're doing anyway. Even when I think I'm still being. Right? It's just the other word that comes to mind for me is flow, like just like being in the flow of my life, and like the Maya too is the mind, right? It's like the mind can come in so hard with I'm going to do this, like this is right, and it connects, at least for me, a lot with kind of American culture and how it's brought up. You know, like you set your mind to it, you can do anything you want. And so I'm going from A to B, but you know, I don't necessarily care who I have to hurt in order to get to B. I'm just going to do whatever it takes to get to B. And I get that, you know, kind of embracing the power of the mind, which is an amazing thing, and being determined, and that there's a beauty in that. But it also feels like I'm trying to avoid what the reality is. And the reality is that I'm a part of something much larger than myself. And no matter how powerful my mind is, I'm still living, like you said, in community, no matter what, with a bunch of other minds. And I could never have predicted my whole life. And there's all these forces that are, you know, outside of me. So can I let go and be in the flow and just be? And maybe, I guess, a question to ask you is another thing that maybe prevents me from being is a fear that then I'm going to be lazy, that if I just be, then I'm not going to reach my potential. I'm going to live a lazy life. What do you think of that?
Well, you know, it's qualitative. You know, it has to do with attitude, really, because one of the mottos here, the sayings that Gurudev used to share all the time, was to be easeful, peaceful, and useful. You know, all those different definitions of yoga that we have, like yoga is perfection in action. Well, it doesn't mean that you don't make a mistake. It doesn't mean, you know, you'd be so insecure and fearful if you felt like you had to live without making a mistake. That would be absurd. It just has to do with your attitude. And it has to do with control of the mind. That's what it has to do with. So it doesn't mean to be lazy. It doesn't even mean to not to be successful, or not to even want to be successful. I remember people ask that question to Gurudev. So if I'm a yogi, does it mean that I'm not interested in success or achieving? He said, on the contrary. He said, you can be the most successful. It has to do with how you deal with it. You know, are you dealing with it from a detached point of view, that this is your role now, and you have something to do? We do have something to do in the world. It's that double vision that he spoke about. Being, and you know, Jesus spoke about it, all the great masters, being in the world, but not of it. That's what it's about. In the world, you do, you act, you navigate the world that way. You judge some, you know, you navigate the world. You're going to be feeling sad. you're going to be feeling emotional. You're going to be feeling happy. It's going to be temporary. That's the nature of the world. The pleasure, the pain, it comes and goes. Everything comes and goes. And we need to learn to navigate that, and we're in it. But at the same time, we're not of it. And that's the purpose of all these yogic practices, all the spiritual practices, probably of every religion. We find ourselves in the world. And in yoga, they teach that it's only in a human body that you can experience self-realization or enlightenment or liberation. If you didn't have all these things that were binding you, why would you even go for liberation? You wouldn't even think about it. So we're in the world, but all the practices and all the spiritual traditions are there to teach us that we're not of it. We're larger than that. We're that, and we're more than that. God is nothing, and God is everything.
I love that.
It's an awareness, an expansion of the awareness that, yes, you don't identify. I was thinking about that. Every morning I'm going for a walk on the Lotus Road early in the morning. And it's really like a walking meditation. And I was thinking about the I and how it's tied up with identity. I was watching a documentary last night about Ben Gurion, former prime minister, late former prime minister of Israel. And he was such an extraordinary person. I didn't even know that he practiced Buddhism. And his goal was to stand on his head. He must have been in his 70s, and he accomplished it. He was so happy. But he talked about it. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was listening to my guru. He said, what makes life so difficult for us is selfishness. He said, and that has to do with the I. And he said it, I, always identifying with the I. He said it, the same thing that we learn in yoga, constantly identifying with the I, looking at, it's not like you're not an I, but you're an I in the larger I, in the, call it cosmic consciousness or God or whatever. The universal I is there. So we're part of that, but if you only identify, and it's the double vision, if you only identify with a little I, or, however you want to put it, it's not like you want to negate it, but if you identify with any of these roles, it causes pain because they're not the whole truth. They're only part of the reality. They're not the reality. But if you also think you have a vision of the whole and keep that vision, and how do you keep that vision? To me, it's the inspiration I get from the spiritual masters, the enlightened masters from any tradition and all traditions who I see have accomplished that. And you can feel it. Even if you're not in their physical presence, just read about their lives of these holy people. And I think to myself, they had trials and tribulations. They made mistakes. They were in the world. Some had families. Some didn't. But they all achieved permanent peace, these people. So I know it can be done. I said, it's something to do, while we're in this body. But I also know that it's grace, that you do whatever it takes, whatever you think it takes to grow spiritually. And then I just find at some point you just let go, and you let go and you watch it. You observe.
And is that where the unconditional love is? When you let go, do you feel that?
I believe so, because there's no more tension. I think that love, unconditional love, in that state, there's no tension. I remember, we have a friend, Paul Oko, who's a Chinese herbalist and massage therapist, and he told me once that Gurudev would come for a massage sometimes, and he said to me, Gurudev was already in his old age, and Paul said to me, Kumari, he said, it's really amazing. He said, Gurudev looks his age, but the quality of his body, he said, on a deep level, is like somebody 25 years old. There's no tension, he said. There's no tension. He said, I give him a massage. There's no, we have knots. He said, there's no tension there. And I know that exists. That state exists. I have faith. It is a matter of faith. But that also seems to come with the effort. That's where the doing comes. You have to choose what you want to do. Yes, if you're in life and you have a family, you start with the family, you start with the relationship, you start with the community, and you do more and more of what you can do. That's selfless. That's the attitude. Why am I wanting to accomplish this? Is it just for me? Is it because I identify with accomplishing it, becoming a great this or a great that? Or is it because I have something to offer? The Dharma is to fulfill your potential, but to do it for the right reasons.
Right. That's where the slowing down, I think, comes into play for me, and perhaps for others. So if I can slow down enough to just ask the question, what makes sense for my life to do with my time? Then I think maybe we all come to the same answer of sorts, and that is to be of service.
That's right.
Nothing else makes sense. Why am I improving myself, working on myself, getting these things, doing for what purpose? Just to have it? That doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm. I mean, I think if we really stop and think about service, serving selflessly, I think we have to admit to ourselves that we get the greatest peace in doing that, and the greatest fulfillment, if you want to call it that. Because it seems, I bet, just because even on every level, we know that this is the right thing to do.
I think so too. I would actually love more of that conversation around, because it can be quite confusing around selfless and selfish, and right, because they're so intertwined. Because if there was an opportunity to help someone in a moment, and without thinking, I just take it because it feels right, and I do that. And then if I stop after that's over and just notice how my heart feels, that was good for me to do something good for someone else. That was good for me to do something good for someone else. And I think it's okay to say it and to know it. And actually, I think for my life personally, the more I've recognized that to be the case, probably the more good deeds I've done, knowing that this is how it works and being okay with it.
Can you imagine being in a state where that's all you do? That's the heaven on earth. I mean, we have a great opportunity here to practice that, don't we? Because there aren't too many places you can go. We're not, but even in the city, even in New York, the New York Integral Yoga Institute. I remember I used to teach there a lot. And I'm from New York, and I remember one time Gurudev was visiting. He must have been giving talks or something, and he stayed there. He would stay at the IYI, and we had a little impromptu satsang one night with him. There were just a few people, like maybe 10 people, and somebody asked him, Gurudev, do you think that in a place like New York City, you could be spiritual? One can be spiritual? And Gurudev said, where else would you be spiritual? And I thought that was the greatest. I never forgot it. It was so many years ago. It was just the greatest answer, because here, it's even more difficult there in certain ways, more temptations. You have to really develop the discipline, right? And the dedication and the devotion to your growth, because there, you feel upset or something, you just go to a cafe, you go to a restaurant, there's always some place to go. And here at the ashram, where do you go? Sometimes you could find your little way to the Mandala Cafe, and that's good too. But really, in general, here we are. We're kind of isolated, really. And but then we're also the world. It's a microcosm. That story that Gurudev used to tell about the Swami going into a cave because he wanted to overcome anger. He wanted to overcome his anger. So he decided to go into a cave, isolate himself completely, no interaction whatsoever for as long as it took. He went in the cave and he had his food brought to him, left outside the cave door. Maybe it was a hut, and left it outside and picked up, and he didn't see anybody. And it took 10 years. He felt he was there for 10 years. He had finally achieved his goal. He overcame his anger. It was time to go out into the world because he was completely over anger. And he goes out of his hut or cave, and he encounters another Swami. A monk was walking by and said, "Oh, wow, you're out of your cave, Swamiji. So you did it. Did you finally overcome your anger?" And he said, "Oh, yes, I overcame my anger." "Really?" The other Swami said, "You really overcame it completely?" Yes, I will never be angry again. I overcame my anger. My mind is in total control. He said, "Wow, I can't believe it. You really, really overcame it under any circumstances?" And the Swami said, "You fool! What's wrong with you? I've been telling you for the last 5 minutes. I don't get angry anymore." And then he stops and looks and he runs away and doesn't come back. So, we always used to laugh at that. But the point is, if you don't test yourself out in the world, really, you can tell yourself anything, and very peaceful usually can be. Sometimes it's not so peaceful to isolate yourself and be with your own mind either.
Right.
But you know what the point is. Yeah.
Reverend Kumari, thank you so much. And thank you for being such a steady presence in this community. It's really meant a lot to me. And yeah, I love hearing you talk about unconditional love and your experiences. And yeah, thank you for being the person that you are.
Thank you so much. And the same with you. Thanks for being here and staying and getting to know you and your beautiful family. And thank you so much for having me.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Hari Om.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.